The mind becomes sharper the moment you stop treating your first thought as unquestionable truth. Most people move through life believing that whatever appears in their mind first must be correct. They see someone's expression and immediately decide what that person thinks of them. They hear criticism and immediately assume it is an attack. They experience failure and immediately conclude that they are incapable. They hear a rumor and begin repeating it before asking whether it is true. This habit feels natural because the human mind is designed to make quick judgments. But speed and accuracy are not the same thing. Your first impression is often only a hypothesis. The sharper mind understands this. When something happens, instead of immediately asking, "What does this mean?" ask, "What else could this mean?" That single question creates distance between reality and your interpretation of reality. And inside that distance, better thinking becomes possible. Imagine someone sends you a short message. "We need to talk." Your first reaction may be anxiety. You may assume something is wrong. You may begin imagining conflict, rejection, or bad news. But the message itself contains very little information. Everything beyond those words is your mind creating a story. A weaker thinker believes the story immediately. A sharper thinker waits for evidence. This does not mean becoming suspicious of everything. It means refusing to confuse assumptions with facts. Your mind constantly fills gaps. When information is missing, it creates explanations. Sometimes those explanations are useful. Other times they are completely wrong. If you do not learn to question them, you can spend your life reacting to stories you invented yourself. This becomes especially dangerous when emotions are involved. When you are angry, your mind searches for evidence that justifies your anger. When you are afraid, your attention moves toward information that confirms danger. When you strongly desire something, you become more likely to notice reasons why it will work and ignore reasons why it may fail. This is why emotional control and sharp thinking are connected. You cannot always control the first thought that appears in your mind, but you can control whether you accept it. That is the beginning of intellectual discipline. When you feel certain about something, pause. Ask yourself what evidence supports your conclusion. Then ask what evidence might challenge it. Consider whether you are interpreting the situation through fear, pride, jealousy, desire, or previous experience. Ask whether you would reach the same conclusion if you were emotionally detached. These questions may feel uncomfortable because they force you to challenge yourself, but that discomfort is useful. A mind that never questions itself becomes easy to manipulate. Anyone who understands your assumptions can predict your reactions. If they know what you fear, they can use fear. If they know what you desire, they can use desire. If they know what makes you angry, they can provoke you. The sharper mind creates an internal checkpoint. Before believing, examine. Before reacting, observe. Before judging, investigate. Before deciding, consider alternatives. This does not make you slow or indecisive. In fact, it can make you faster in the long run because you stop wasting energy correcting decisions made through impulse. Think about how often people repeat the same mistakes because they never question their interpretation of the previous mistake. They blame circumstances, blame other people, or blame luck. They never ask what assumption led them there. A truly sharp mind studies its own errors. When something goes wrong, do not simply ask, "Who is responsible?" Ask, "What did I fail to see?" That question turns failure into information. The goal is not to eliminate intuition. Intuition can be powerful when it has been built through experience. The goal is to combine intuition with examination. Notice your first impression, but do not become its prisoner. Let the first thought arrive, then interrogate it. Because the mind becomes truly sharp when it learns that every first conclusion is an invitation to investigate, not an order to believe. A sharp mind is not simply a mind that knows a lot. It is a mind that knows what deserves attention and what does not. You can read hundreds of books, collect endless information, and surround yourself with constant stimulation, yet remain mentally weak if your attention is scattered across everything that demands it. The modern world has discovered how to compete for your attention every second of the day. Notifications, messages, arguments, entertainment, opinions, short videos, breaking news, and other people's problems all compete for a small piece of your mind. If you allow everything to enter, eventually nothing receives enough concentration to be understood deeply. Your attention is not unlimited. That makes it valuable. Most people treat attention as if it were free. They open their phone whenever they feel bored. They interrupt important work to check a notification. They enter arguments with strangers whose opinions will have no effect on their future. They spend hours consuming information that disappears from their memory almost immediately. Then they wonder why they cannot concentrate. The problem is not always a lack of intelligence. It is often a lack of control. A distracted mind becomes a reactive mind. Something happens and you immediately respond. A notification appears and you look. Someone posts an opinion and you feel compelled to react. Someone criticizes you and you begin defending yourself. A new piece of information appears and you abandon what you were doing to investigate it. Your mind is constantly being pulled outward. And a mind that is constantly being pulled outward rarely develops the ability to think deeply. If you want to make your mind sharper, you must become ruthless about what deserves your attention. This does not mean becoming isolated or ignoring everything around you. It means understanding that every hour of concentration spent on one thing is an hour you cannot spend on something else. Attention has an opportunity cost. When you spend 30 minutes arguing about something meaningless, you have lost 30 minutes that could have been used to learn a skill. When you spend an hour comparing your life to strangers online, you have lost an hour that could have been invested in improving your own. When you repeatedly interrupt your work to check messages, you damage your ability to maintain deep concentration. The cost is not always visible immediately, but over months and years, it becomes enormous. A sharper mind learns to create periods of uninterrupted concentration. During those periods, you are not checking what everyone else is doing. You are not responding to every interruption. You are not allowing external noise to determine your internal state. You are thinking, reading, writing, studying, creating, solving. This is where mental strength begins to develop. There is also a psychological dimension to controlling attention. Whoever controls your attention gains influence over you. If another person's behavior can instantly determine what you think about for the next 3 hours, they possess more influence over your mind than they should. Someone insults you and you spend the entire evening thinking about them. Someone ignores you and you keep checking your phone. Someone succeeds and you become obsessed with comparing yourself. Someone disagrees with you and you feel compelled to prove them wrong. Notice the pattern. They may have spent only a few seconds affecting you, but you continue giving them hours of mental space. A sharp mind knows when to close the door. You can notice something without following it. You can hear criticism without obsessing over it. You can disagree without entering an argument. You can see something provocative without allowing it to control your mood. This is not indifference. It is discipline. Begin asking yourself throughout the day, is this worth my attention? If the answer is no, move on. If it is important, give it your full concentration. This simple habit can transform the quality of your thinking because depth requires uninterrupted attention. The more deliberately you control what enters your mind, the more clearly you can analyze what remains. Your mind becomes sharper when your attention stops being available to everything. One of the greatest advantages a sharp mind can develop is the ability to see patterns where other people see only isolated events. Most people experience life as a series of disconnected moments. Something happens today, something else happens next week, and they treat each event as if it exists independently. But human behavior rarely works that way. Actions repeat, habits repeat, mistakes repeat, relationships follow patterns. Even your own decisions often reveal structures that you fail to notice because you are too close to them. The sharper mind learns to step back and ask, have I seen this before? That question can change the way you understand almost everything. Imagine someone repeatedly promises to change, but continues behaving exactly as before. A person focused only on individual events may believe each apology is a fresh beginning. But someone who studies patterns notices something different. The apology is part of the pattern. The promise is part of the pattern. The behavior that follows is part of the pattern. One event can be misleading. A pattern is harder to ignore. This is why you should stop judging people only by what they say in a single moment. Watch what they repeatedly do. Words can change quickly, but patterns usually require much more effort to change. The same principle applies to yourselves. Perhaps you repeatedly postpone important work. Every morning you tell yourself that tomorrow will be different. Perhaps you repeatedly become motivated for a few days and then abandon your plan. Perhaps you repeatedly choose immediate comfort over long-term progress. If you examine each failure separately, you may blame circumstances. But if you examine the pattern, you discover something much more valuable, information about your behavior. Your mistakes become data. Your habits become evidence. Your repeated reactions become clues. This is how a sharp mind learns. Instead of asking only, why did this happen? Ask, what keeps happening? That question moves you from reaction to analysis. Batals also exist in the behavior of groups and environment. Pay attention to what happens before a conflict begins. Notice which people become aggressive when they feel insecure. Observe how someone behaves when they gain power. Watch how people treat those who cannot offer them anything. Notice what happens when someone is criticized, rejected, or given authority. These moments reveal patterns that ordinary conversations often hide. A person may appear generous when everyone is watching, but repeatedly behave selfishly when there is nothing to gain. Someone may speak about loyalty, but disappear whenever circumstances become difficult. Another person may constantly create conflict and then present themselves as the victim. Do not become obsessed with judging people. Become skilled at observing them. The goal is not suspicion, it is clarity. When you understand patterns, you can anticipate possibilities. You begin recognizing the early signs of problems before they become obvious. You notice that certain decisions consistently produce certain outcomes. You understand that small behaviors, repeated over time, eventually create large consequences. This gives you something extremely valuable: foresight. A person who recognizes the pattern of an argument can prevent the argument. A person who recognizes the pattern of a failing habit can interrupt it. A person who recognizes the pattern of a manipulative relationship can create distance before the damage becomes severe. You no longer have to wait for the final result to understand what is happening, but there is another level of pattern recognition that requires even greater honesty. Recognizing patterns in yourself that you do not like. Perhaps you repeatedly seek approval from people who cannot give it. Perhaps you repeatedly enter the same type of unhealthy relationship. Perhaps you repeatedly become distracted whenever meaningful work becomes difficult. These are not random events, they are signals. The sharper mind does not run from uncomfortable patterns. It studies them without excuses. Ask yourself what keeps repeating in your life, what triggers it, and what consequences follow. Once you see the structure, you can change the structure. The world becomes easier to navigate when you stop seeing every event as a surprise and start recognizing the patterns underneath it. A sharp mind does not merely ask what happened, it learns to recognize what is likely to happen next. One of the greatest enemies of clear thinking is not ignorance, it is emotion without distance. When you are emotionally involved in a situation, your mind does not simply observe reality. It begins to interpret reality according to what you feel. Anger makes certain details appear more important. Fear makes possibilities seem more dangerous. Desire makes you overlook warning signs. Pride makes you defend decisions that should be reconsidered. In these moments, the problem is not that you cannot think. The problem is that your emotions are thinking for you. A sharp mind learns to create distance. This does not mean becoming emotionless. Emotions contain information. Anger may tell you that a boundary has been crossed. Fear may signal that something requires attention. Disappointment may reveal that your expectations were unrealistic. Desire may show you what you deeply want. But information is not instruction. Feeling something does not mean you must immediately act on it. This distinction can completely change the quality of your decisions. Imagine someone criticizes you publicly. Your first instinct may be to defend yourself. You feel embarrassed, so your mind searches for a response. You want to prove that they are wrong. But if you react while emotionally charged, you may say something that creates a much bigger problem than the original criticism. Now imagine that you pause, you feel the anger, but you do not obey it. You take a breath, you observe what actually happened. You ask whether the criticism contains any truth. You consider whether responding will improve the situation or simply satisfy your desire to defend your ego. That pause is intelligence in action. Emotional distance gives your reasoning time to catch up with your feelings. The same principle applies to fear. Fear can make you imagine consequences that have not happened. One possibility becomes 10 possibilities, and suddenly your mind is responding to an imaginary future as though it were reality. A sharper thinker separates possibility from probability. Something could happen, but how likely is it? What evidence supports your fear? What evidence contradicts it? What would you advise another person in the same situation? These questions create distance between emotion and judgment. Desire can be even more deceptive. When you desperately want something, your mind becomes skilled at finding reasons to justify it. You may ignore warning signs because you want the relationship to work. You may overlook risks because you want the opportunity. You may continue pursuing an unrealistic goal because admitting the truth would hurt your pride. The sharper mind asks a difficult question. If I did not want this so badly, what would I see? That question can expose reality. Emotional distance also changes how you read other people. If someone is angry, you do not automatically become angry with them. If someone is anxious, you do not automatically absorb their anxiety. If someone is trying to provoke you do not have to participate. You observe the emotion without becoming controlled by it. This is particularly powerful in conflict. Two emotionally reactive people can turn a small disagreement into a war because each reaction creates another reaction. One person becomes angry, the other becomes defensive, then the first becomes more aggressive, and suddenly neither remembers what started the conflict. The person who remains calm can interrupt the entire cycle. Calmness is not weakness. It is cognitive space. When you remain calm, you can notice details that emotional people miss. You can hear the words beneath the tone. You can identify contradictions. You can recognize manipulation. You can choose the moment when speaking will actually accomplish something. The goal is not to suppress emotion until you feel nothing. Suppressed emotion eventually finds another way to control you. The goal is to observe emotion without surrendering your judgment to it. Feel the anger, study it, feel the fear, question it, feel the desire, examine it, then decide. The mind becomes sharper when emotions become signals rather than commands. And the person who can step outside their emotional reaction, even for a few moments, gains the ability to see what others cannot see while they are trapped inside theirs. One of the clearest signs of a sharp mind is the ability to remain comfortable when there is no simple answer. Most people want certainty. They want to know immediately who is right, who is wrong, whether something will succeed or fail, whether someone can be trusted or not. The mind prefers clean categories because they reduce the effort required to think. But reality is rarely clean. People are complicated. Situations contain contradictions. Outcomes depend on variables you cannot always control. A sharper mind learns to resist the temptation to simplify everything too quickly. You may meet someone who is kind in one situation and selfish in another. Does that automatically make them a good person or a bad person? Perhaps neither. They are human, capable of both generosity and selfishness. You may face an opportunity that could transform your life but also carries serious risks. Is it automatically good or bad? Again, the answer may depend on your circumstances, preparation, timing, and ability to handle the consequences. The weak mind demands certainty. The sharp mind can say, I do not know yet. Those words require more strength than people realize. Admitting uncertainty does not mean you are unintelligent. It means you understand the limits of your current information. Instead of filling the unknown with assumptions, you remain curious, you gather more evidence, you observe, you wait, you allow reality to reveal what you cannot yet see. This ability is especially important when dealing with other people. Do not decide too quickly that someone is your enemy simply because they disagreed with you. Do not assume someone is your friend simply because they complimented you. Do not label someone trustworthy because of one impressive act or untrustworthy because of one mistake. Look at patterns, look at context, look at what happens when circumstances change. A person's character may reveal itself differently under pressure than it does during comfort. Someone may appear generous when resources are abundant and become selfish when resources are scarce. Another person may seem quiet in ordinary situations, but become remarkably dependable during a crisis. Complexity requires observation over time. It also requires the ability to hold competing ideas in your mind without immediately choosing one. Perhaps someone has treated you well but has also disappointed you. Both facts can be true. Perhaps you made a poor decision but still learned something valuable from it. Perhaps you failed at something important but gained information that will improve your next attempt. Life does not always demand a simple conclusion. Sometimes the correct answer is, there is truth on both sides. This way of thinking protects you from extreme reactions. When people see everything in black and white, they become easy to manipulate. Tell them someone is completely evil, and they may believe every accusation. Tell them someone is perfect, and they may ignore every warning sign. Give them one simple explanation, and they may stop investigating. A sharper mind keeps the investigation open. This does not mean refusing to make decisions. Eventually, uncertainty must lead to action. But intelligent decisions are often made after accepting uncertainty rather than pretending it does not exist. Before making an important choice, ask yourself what you know, what you assume, and what you still need to discover. That distinction is powerful. Facts are not the same as interpretations. Possibilities are not the same as probabilities. Confidence is not the same as certainty. And complexity is not the same as confusion. Sometimes the situation is complicated because reality itself is complicated. Learn to become comfortable inside that complexity. When you do not immediately need a simple answer, you become more patient. You listen more carefully. You notice details. You consider perspectives that contradict your own. You become less vulnerable to emotional manipulation because you do not accept the first explanation placed in front of you. You also become more adaptable. When new information appears, you can change your mind without feeling humiliated. You understand that changing a conclusion because the evidence changed is not weakness, it is intelligence. The sharpest mind is not the one that always has an answer. It is the one that knows when an answer is not yet justified. Stay curious, stay observant. Let uncertainty sharpen your thinking instead of frightening you. Because the moment you become comfortable with complexity, you stop demanding easy answers from a world that was never simple. A sharper mind is not created in a single moment of inspiration. It is built through repetition. You can understand every principle of intelligent thinking, recognize every mental trap, and still remain unchanged if you do not turn those ideas into daily habits. Knowledge alone does not transform the mind. Practice does. The mind becomes sharper when you repeatedly force it to observe more carefully, question more deeply, concentrate for longer, and examine its own mistakes without excuses. Think of your mind as something that responds to training. If you constantly feed it distraction, shallow information, emotional arguments, and endless entertainment, it becomes accustomed to reacting rather than thinking. But if you regularly challenge it with difficult ideas, unfamiliar perspectives, deep reading, careful observation, and deliberate reflection, its capacity begins to expand. This is why mental sharpness should become a discipline rather than a temporary goal. Start by reading differently. Do not read simply to finish books. Read to understand. When you encounter an important idea, pause and ask yourself why it matters. What evidence supports it? Where could it be wrong? How does it connect to something you already know? How could this idea be applied to your own life? A single page understood deeply can be more valuable than 50 pages consumed without attention. Then develop the habit of writing. Writing forces the mind to organize what it knows. When thoughts remain inside your head, they can appear clear because they have no structure. The moment you try to put them into words, contradictions become visible. You discover what you actually believe, what you merely assume, and what you still do not understand. Drop down your observations, drop down important decisions, drop down mistakes, drop down what you learned from difficult experiences, then return to those notes later. you will begin noticing patterns in your own thinking. This is one of the most powerful forms of mental training because most people study everyone except themselves. They analyze other people's behavior while repeating their own mistakes without investigation. A sharper mind turns inward as well as outward. After an important decision, ask yourself what influenced it. Were you thinking clearly? Or were you reacting emotionally? Did you have enough information? Did you ignore a warning because you wanted a particular outcome? Did pride prevent you from admitting uncertainty? Do not use these questions to attack yourself. Use them to improve yourself. Your mistakes become valuable when you extract lessons from them. Another important discipline is learning to expose yourself to ideas that challenge your existing beliefs. If you only consume information that confirms what you already think, your mind becomes comfortable but fragile. Seek different perspectives. Study arguments you disagree with. Try to understand why intelligent people can reach conclusions different from yours. You do not have to accept every opposing idea. You simply need to understand it. That ability strengthens intellectual independence. And then there is the discipline of doing nothing for a moment. Silence is increasingly rare, but it gives the mind room to process. Walk without constantly consuming content. Sit with a difficult question. Allow yourself to think without immediately reaching for your phone. Boredom can become useful when it gives your mind space to connect ideas. The goal is not to become someone who thinks constantly. The goal is to become someone who can think deliberately. Over time, these small practices accumulate. You become faster at recognizing patterns. You become slower to accept assumptions. You become better at separating facts from emotion. You become more comfortable with uncertainty. You become more selective with your attention. And eventually, something changes. You stop needing every situation to teach you through pain. You begin learning through observation. You stop repeating every mistake. You begin recognizing patterns early. You stop reacting to every emotion. You begin choosing your responses. That is what a truly sharp mind looks like. Not someone who knows everything, but someone who continually improves the way they think. Train your mind every day, and eventually clear thinking will stop being something you practice and become the way you live.